Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 6 of my book, A Spiritual Soul Book. You want to pick up a copy for yourself, because what you're going to get out of this book is tremendous strength, tremendous insights and wisdom to guide you, to strengthen you, to help improve your life, all based on the words of our great sages. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at my website, spiritualsoulbook.com. I hope this recording is going to be a lot more clearer since I got myself a new mic. So let's give this a shot. You and me, together we're going to go over Chapter 6, and we're going to talk about the immensely greater harm of negative thinking. A lot of people have the wrong idea. What's so bad if I didn't do anything wrong? I just gargled it a little bit in my mind, gave it some thought, entertained the idea, watched a little movie in my brain. I didn't do anything wrong. But we're going to address that idea in this chapter, Chapter 6. Everything is an act. Thinking is also an act. You are generating actual electromagnetic waves that can be picked up by machines. You are having an impact inside your brain, inside your bloodstream, on the environment around you, on your world, on the world at large. So let's attack it together. Chapter 6 of A Spiritual Soul Book. What you allow yourself to think is mightily powerful from all angles. It is from the soul, to the soul, and part of the soul. Why is it from the soul? Because when you are thinking, it is you enclosed in the process and in the tool and in the garment of thought. Your soul is now enclosed within thought, and the process of thinking is you doing the thinking. And so it's from the soul, and it's to the soul, because it's inside your head. So when you are thinking not to anybody on the outside, but what you are communicating with and what the mind is connecting with is yourself. So it's your soul working through the garment of thought, and it's like a loop, thinking for itself. And this is all part of the soul that is invested and involved. It's a process and an experience that involves the soul. To better appreciate the exclusive power of thought over the other garments of the soul, speech and action, let's turn once again to the metaphor of clothing, because we want to give the appropriate attention to where there is a tremendous amount of impact and influence on yourself, and that is through the process of thinking. So let us understand that. Speech and action are like clothing that always remain separate from our real selves, while thought is to the soul like skin is to the frame of our bodies. Skin is perpetually united and at one with the soul. Just like your skin is one with your body, it's not like clothing. You are always walking around with your skin. Your skin is always attached to your experience of the self. The same thing is also with thought. Thought is perpetually, it is all the time, eternally connected with the identity of the self. That is why you can never stop thinking. Just like you can never take off your skin. Your skin is itching, or you did something to your skin. You like something about your skin, you don't like something about your skin, you got to deal with it, because you'll always be carrying around the experience of your skin. It is all the time connected with you, with your body. It is always on always demanding your attention. The soul garments of speech and action are on the outside. They are like the clothing that you put on and you take off. And it is put on, for the most part, for the sake of the outside. They are meant to make an impression on outsiders. Of course, it has an impression on yourself. And sometimes you put on clothing only for yourself. You're cold, you're hot. But the greater you can be cooled and you can be warmed without clothing. You can put on an air conditioning. You can put on a heater. But your skin, you're stuck with it. How you deal with your skin and how your skin deals with you is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week consideration. There's no way to run away from thought because it is connected intrinsically with your soul. Thought is an internal expression of the soul made inwardly and for oneself. Anytime you do any kind of thinking, that is your soul expressing itself through that thinking. And when you express yourself through that process of thinking, for the most part, the impact of that thinking is going to be inwardly for yourself. That's very powerful to keep in mind, because then it makes it even more important and more of a reason, as we're going to discuss in just a couple of moments, why you should be so aware and responsible for the kind of thoughts you allow going on in your head. Let me tell you, there was a saying of the Hasidim that what's the difference between a shoita? What's the difference between a fool and a normal person? A fool, a shoita, he has no control over his actions, and he has no control over his mouth. He's just not disciplined. He does things that are not logical, that are distorted, that don't make any sense, and that's what makes him a fool. He's not mature. He's not acting in ways that are appropriate for the time, for the moment, for the place, and for whatever else it is. When a person allows his thoughts to go wild, and they're not appropriate for the time, for the place, they're distorted, they're exaggerated, they're not disciplined, they're not proper. The truth of the matter is, the guy himself that is thinking that way is a shoita, he's a fool, he's an idiot. The only difference is that he's a shoita nistar. That's a little play of words in Hebrew, because there's a tzaddik nistar. There is a righteous man that nobody knows he's righteous because he keeps it private between him and God. But here it's in a negative sense. So a person who just lets his mind go wild without discipline, he's a shoita nistar. He's a concealed idiot. He's a fool. Because in the same way that the only people who behave without discipline, without rules, and without appropriateness are considered idiots and fools, and for good reason, the same thing is a person who allows his mind to go unchecked and to go unbalanced. So when a person is thinking, it's an expression of the soul, it's an act, it's a choice that the person is experiencing, but the only difference is that it's made inwardly, it's made within the person himself, inside his head. And as we said in the earlier classes, that's basically where a person lives, inside his head. That's his real abode. That's his real house. That's really where a person lives for the most part, in his head. And so he's acting in a way within his own house to himself according to the thoughts that he allows himself to think. The thoughts a person decides to think constitute an internal communication to and from the person who decided to think them. Thoughts are always an internal double whammy. Why are they an internal double whammy? They are influenced from and by the person, and they impact the same person. So it's not just a one-way road, and you got to take the responsibility of one act. It's two ways. It's inside yourself. So you are going to feel, and you're going to have to suffer or benefit from the consequences of your thoughts, both in the expression and in the manner in which you use your thought, and in the repercussions and in the consequences of what those thoughts are all about. This fact that thoughts are one, united with the soul, which is our life force, it's me, my I, is eternally, perpetually connected to the process and to the experience of thought, like we said before, like the skin is constantly connected to me, to my body, to my physical me. This presents an additional and necessary measure of respect for our thoughts. Bad thoughts will leave a deep imperfection and blemish, even if it's only once. Could you imagine a person saying, I'm going to take some poison? It's only once. No, it's a fast one. I'm just going to stick it in quick. Anybody with a straight mind understands you putting poison into your mouth or through your nose or whatever it is, through your blood, this can affect you permanently, forever. The same thing is also, and even worse so, with thoughts. When a person allows something no good to go in through his mind, there's no such thing that it's only once. It's seriously going into your system. It's flowing through who you are, and God forbid, or if it's positive, the benefit could be an impact forever. Positive, optimistic thoughts will cause positive manipulations of the soul, and because of its closeness to the soul, thoughts will affect the soul far more profoundly than will speech and action. That's incredible. So, because thought is a double whammy inside to yourself, and it is so attached to you all the time, and it is on such a refined level, way more than the other garments, therefore, its effect on your soul, on your character, on your personality, is going to be a lot more deeply felt than the garments of speech and action. Speech and action have their place too. And of course it's going to affect you. As we said in the earlier chapters, they are called my honorable ones. They give honor to the person. They have a positive impact on the individual, the way the person speaks or the way the person acts. All of that is magnified so many times more so with the case of the garment of thought. The garment of thought not only has more impact on the soul, it is also more sophisticated and refined than the other garments. Any stain or spot on a sensitive, refined garment will stand out more boldly, and the benefit or the negative impact is also going to be compounded so many times more so when it's on a refined, more expensive garment than when it's on a coarse and inexpensive garment. A hole or defect on clothing does not compare to a cut or a blemish on one's skin. Just like the skin is a garment that is so much more closely and so much more connected to me, and therefore a hole in my skin impacts me a lot more so than a hole in my clothing. The same thing is also within myself, a hole, so to say, using a metaphor, a blemish, a nick in the clothing and in the garment of thought is going to be a lot more deeply felt and impactful when it's in thought than when it's in speech or in action. That's tremendous to know that. So when you fill your mind with positive and spiritual thoughts, and you take your soul and you meditate in the thoughts of the books of Psalms or in the words of the Torah or whatever it may be, you are in clothing and you are putting yourself in the garment and the words of some uplifted, refined, and very, very powerful, positive connection between the soul and and the act that you're doing at that moment. And that's going to not only envelop and not only going to influence the soul that is using this tool and garment at the moment, but the loop is going to loop its way back and affect the soul in a much deeper way than when you're just speaking or acting in some spiritual or in some positive kind of a way. The percentage of value that is lost as a result of a blemish on an expensive car or a diamond is much steeper than a loss resulting from an equivalent blemish on a cheaper or less significant item. So if we are going to consider the garment of thought to be a lot more refined and a lot more sensitive than the garment of speech and action, so in this visualization, just like when you make a blemish in a beautiful, expensive silk garment, it's going to not only impact the value of the general garment in a more significant way than if you nicked some jeans at the corner of the jean. It's also going to, as the general image goes, it's going to diminish the garment in a much more significant way than when it's something of less importance. There's a story of once a chassid. He went into, let's call it a furniture store, or he went into a garment store, and maybe it was, what do they call that, Nordstrom's rack, or or these other places where you can get both the good stuff and you can get the end of the season stuff, or what was returned back to the store. So he goes in to the store to get himself some clothes, and he sees that there is one side of the store where you can get quality suits, let's say, and dresses at their almost regular price, and then a little bit there to the side there are these returns that are not packaged the right way, or maybe it had some kind of a nick in it, or whatever else it is, and they're being sold at a reduced price. Then he goes to another side of the store, or another level of the store, and there are clothing over there that are a lot more expensive, on a much higher grade of quality, and of course the price tag is much higher. And to the side of them there are again all these packages and whatever that are out of the package and a little bit maybe they were worn once and they have a little bit kind of a blemish and whatever else is. But he notices that the difference in the discount on the more expensive clothing or the more expensive furniture is a lot more steeper than on the clothing or on the furniture that is of a lower quality. So he goes up to the salesman, and out of curiosity says, how come that's the case? I noticed that on the cheaper clothing the discount is only like 20%, 25%, and that turns out to be only $2-3, while the discount on the more expensive stuff turns out to be hundreds of dollars in some cases. And the fellow says it's very simple. Because you're talking about things that are much more expensive, when they get blemished and when they get compromised, the blemish and the compromise is a lot more, people care a lot more And therefore, it diminishes the value in more expensive things a lot more than on things that to begin with are only $1. So at a discount, you can buy it for 80 cents, 75 cents, 40 cents. You save yourself 40 cents. But when you're talking about something that's worth $500, so the saving is not just going to be $10 or 50 cents. The saving, right, at a discounted price is going to be a lot more than the things that were cheaper to begin with. The idea is that when something is expensive and it gets a blemish, so the damage is a lot more of a damage than when something less expensive and less of value gets diminished or gets blemished. And the idea is that because thought is so spiritual and it's so refined and it's so much more like a silk garment, so when it isn't used properly, the impact on the person, on his character, and just on his general well-being is going to be a lot more deeper and a lot more serious to the person himself. This is what our books mean when it says that thoughts of sin are worse than sin itself. You remember at the beginning of today's class, there are some people who say, why is thinking all that bad? I didn't do anything wrong. So we just got the answer. The answer is because thought is so intimately attached to the soul, a bad thought will cause greater harm to the soul and to the person themselves than even a bad action. When somebody gives thought and entertains an idea that is not right, it's not the right time, it's not disciplined, it's distorted, it's exaggerated, you know it's not accurate, it's not appropriate, it's not proper, this is going to make a greater harm on the person than if even they acted in a way that wasn't right. In a long-term sense, on the person themselves, it's going to be a much deeper blemish on the soul and on the identity of the person than any bad speech that a person can say. The prophets would admonish the people that all their sacrifices are worthless because their thoughts and intentions were compromised. So even that they were doing a good act, but because their thoughts were compromised, so then that devalued the act itself, because it was like a superficial offering to God where the person was not really intimately connected in getting closer with God. It's like a husband or a wife giving a gift to each other and their mind is totally on some other person. That would be totally disrespectful. That would be totally inappropriate. That would be really compromising and dishonest, deceiving. That's the worst thing. Better not do anything at all than pretend and in your mind be totally someplace else. Just like the prophets repeated again and again to the Jewish people. When you come to the synagogue, when you come to the temple and you bring a sacrifice, your mind has to be in what you're doing. Maimonides says clearly that if a person brought a sacrifice and he didn't have his mind in the right place, his mind wasn't filled with remorse, the sacrifice was worth nothing at all. There are some very clear rules in the Torah which is called pigul, or pigul, that if a person brought a sacrifice and he had in his mind that he was going to bring the sacrifice in an improper kind of a way, disqualified the sacrifice in a very serious way. If you ate the sacrifice, there was a serious transgression involved in eating that kind of a sacrifice that was blemished just by a thought. That's the impact that thought has on this exterior animal that was being offered in the temple. The Bible tells us of a king who had bad intentions when he was doing good deeds. He was rewarded for his good actions, but he was punished for his evil thoughts. So we see how these are very distinct. The thoughts is distinct from the actions. And when a person doesn't have the right thoughts, this is very much recognized and will make its own impact all by itself. Indeed, that's how we end chapter 6, because I don't want to draw these classes out for too long. But that's how I conclude chapter 6 in the best book around, a spiritual soul book. Indeed, thoughts are very real and very, very powerful. Yup. You got to recognize that. And this is the time to consider all those ideas in this last month of the year as we conclude and we make our we make a self-evaluation in order to see what was done right and what can use improvement for the coming year, so that on the judgment days of the high holidays, God grants us a much better year than ever in the past. Okay, until next time, get the book. You can listen to this recording. I'm going to listen to it myself right now, and hopefully it's better than the past recordings. And you can listen to the recording together with the chapter, and you will better appreciate than if you were just reading the chapter by itself. Have a great day, everybody.